At Christmas, we celebrate the incarnation. The root word of incarnation, I looked it up this week, is the Latin word caro, which means flesh. Caro is also the root word of carnivorous, which I am. I'm a meat eater, probably like most of you. I saw someone wearing a t-shirt once that had the letters PETA on it, which usually stands for People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, right? But in this case, it was an acronym for another organization, People Eating Tasty Animals. So I don't know if I would ever join a club like that, but I certainly could. In the incarnation, God became infleshed, incarnated, just like us, just like our animal friends. The question I've been pondering the past few weeks is, why would God want to? The world can be a terrible place. Alfred Lloyd Tennyson once described nature as being red in tooth and claw. In other words, nature is often carnivorous, right? It can be a bloody mess. In M. Scott Peck's book, The Road Less Traveled, he begins his book with a famous three-word sentence: life is difficult. That's where he starts. Coming to terms with that reality is one of the biggest projects that we face as human beings. It's a lifelong process, figuring that out. Thomas Hobbes, the English philosopher, once said, life is nasty, brutish, and short. Or as George Carlin once put it, life is tough, then you die. Years ago, I heard about a tribe of gypsies in India who mourn every time a baby is born. They grieve. They grieve the suffering that child will inevitably experience in life. And then they turn around and they celebrate when a person dies, knowing that they are now free from suffering. And I'm not sure what it says about me, but I get it. There are times when I feel like that too. I'm guessing probably you do too. One of my favorite John Prine songs is called Angel from Montgomery. And I think it captures that longing we sometimes have to escape the sadness, to escape the suffering of this world. The chorus goes like this: make me an angel that flies from Montgomery. Make me a poster of an old rodeo. Just give me one thing that I can hold on to. To believe in this living is just a hard way to go. I can't count the number of times that last line has gone through my mind when bad things happen to people I know and love. To believe in this living is just a hard way to go. The world can be a terrible place, and yet God chose to become a part of it. In Jesus, God came near. But why? I think it's a fair question to ask. Because even when things aren't downright difficult and terrible, life can present other kinds of challenges. For instance, how about when things get awkward? That's no fun. Of course, making a dumb mistake or doing something awkward isn't the worst thing that can happen, but it's still no fun. There's a series of Southwest airline commercials that have been going through my head just recently, and they use the tagline, "Want to get away?" And they always start the same way. They start off with someone making a really embarrassing mistake, an awkward blunder of some kind. So I'm going to play you one of my favorites.
General, there's been a breach. We need your password so we can lock down the system.
My password?
Yes, sir, we need your password.
The password that I use?
Yes, sir, your password.
There's been another breach.
Sir.
Right, okay. IHATEMYJOB1.
I hate my job. One.
Want to get away? Now you can with Southwest Fair.
To be human is to experience stuff like that. It's what it means to be human. And I can assure you, pastors aren't immune from awkward stuff either. In fact, I've got a story, an embarrassing story. I've waited until this moment to share with anyone. Tammy doesn't even know it happened because it was so embarrassing at the time, I didn't want to tell her. It happened when we were back in November. We were back in Ohio to see our new grandson. And the incident in question happened on a Sunday morning. So we had a little bit of time that day, so we decided to visit this big church I was curious about. Because it's always fun for a minister like me to go to another church and see how things are done and not have to do anything, just to be present. So we pulled into the parking lot. We were greeted by this friendly older gentleman. We got into the building. We followed the signs to the sanctuary. And as we got into the area just outside of the sanctuary, I spotted a coffee machine. And there was a lot of activity going on in that area, but there was only one guy near the coffee maker. And so I watched him for a minute, and I couldn't tell if he was getting coffee or what. All I knew was that it was taking him a long time, right? It seemed like he was just kind of hovering there, and all I wanted was a quick cup of black coffee. That's it. It's going to take me a second. So I reached around him, and I got a cup, and I filled it up. So I was fast. I went really fast, but when I finished, I noticed that he backed up and was standing behind me, smiling like he was waiting in line. And I immediately thought to myself, oops, I guess I cut in line. And then I thought, oh, well, I'll never see him again. So Tammy and I went into the sanctuary. We found a seat, and the band played a few songs, and I was sipping on my coffee, and I was enjoying being in a service where I didn't have to do anything. And then, guess who got up to preach the sermon? Yep, the old slow guy who I just cut in front of for coffee. Can you say, want to get away? I wanted to get away. Back in 1995, the singer-songwriter Joan Osborne wrote a song called What If God Was One of Us? You may remember that song. And the chorus of the song goes like this: what if God was one of us, just a slob like one of us, just a stranger on the bus trying to make his way home? I don't think Joan Osborne set out to capture the truth of the incarnation with those words, but in a way, I think she did. When God became one of us in Jesus, He signed up for all of the suffering and all of the indignities that come with being a human. And we see that even at the beginning of Jesus' story. Now, we like to romanticize the story of Jesus' birth, but the truth is Jesus was born in a space where animals lived and did their business, right? That's where he was born. Did you ever leave the door open as a kid and get asked the question, were you born in a barn? You ever get that? Well, chances are you weren't, but Jesus was. As we'll see in our scripture reading for today, there was no room for Mary and Joseph in the inn. And of course, when we hear the word inn, we tend to imagine the first century equivalent of like a Holiday Inn Express or something like that. But most scholars believe that the inn didn't describe a hotel of any kind. There was no innkeeper. I know we've come up with that in Christmas cards and Christmas stories. There's no innkeeper in the Bible, just so you know. That it was actually the sleeping quarters above where ordinary families kept their livestock. But it was also, that was a living space. It's where they cooked. It's where they lived during the day. And so naturally, because livestock was like a family's bank account, they wanted to keep them as close and safe as possible. So they basically lived with them. And that's how it was in Bethlehem at the time of Caesar's census. Because there were so many people coming back to Bethlehem, like Joseph, to be counted for Caesar's census, there weren't any extra sleeping quarters available in the homes of Joseph's extended family. He had family there. That's where he was from. So Mary and Joseph had to take whatever space was available. That makes a lot of sense to me because that's how my family works. Maybe yours too. We all get together for July 4th every year. We get a whole bunch of people in, a bunch of friends and family. And when we're all together for those couple of days, the old folks get the good bedrooms on the first floor, right? And the young folks, even the married ones, they sleep in the basement on air mattresses, usually. I think that's how it was for Mary and Joseph. It wasn't terrible, but it also wasn't an ideal situation. It certainly wasn't the best place to have a baby. Mary might not have been as particular as my daughter was when she brought her newborn son home, but I'm guessing she still would have preferred not to have given birth in a place where there was also fresh manure on the ground, right? There's no getting around it. Jesus came into the world in an undignified way. And he left the world in an undignified way. Jesus was executed like a common criminal. In the Roman Empire, crucifixion was the preferred punishment for people accused of anything from theft to fomenting revolution, which of course is what Jesus was accused of. Crucifixion was not only a painful way to die, it was a humiliating way to die. And that was the whole point. They wanted to scare people off from doing crime. When the Word became flesh, God signed up for all of that. Jesus was God's Son, but he wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He wasn't born on third base and thought he'd hit a triple. Jesus was one of us in every way, including experiencing all the pain, all the humiliation that comes with being human. One of the reasons I love Luke's version of the Christmas story is because, one, he gives us all that information about the humble nature of Jesus' birth, but he grounds it in real time, in real places, real people. In the first verses of chapter 2, he gives us the historical context of Jesus' birth. If I was describing a similar situation today, I might say something like this. In those days, a new tax law went into effect, right? And so they needed to do a new census. Everybody had to be counted. So a young man named Joseph and his pregnant wife Mary went to Joseph's hometown, let's say in Keokuk, to be counted. It was when Joe Biden was president of the United States and Kim Reynolds was governor of Iowa. That's the historical context. And Joseph and Mary stayed in the basement of Joseph's uncle because there were no good bedrooms on the first floor, right? They were all taken. And it was there among the spider webs and cardboard boxes Mary gave birth to her firstborn son. Luke's version, of course, is much better than mine. So let's read that one. That's found in Luke chapter 2, beginning at verse 1. In those days, a decree went out from Emperor Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration and was taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. All went to their own towns to be registered. Joseph also went from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to the city of David called Bethlehem, because he was descended from the house and family of David. He went to be registered with Mary, to whom he was engaged and who was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for her to deliver her child. And she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in bands of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no place for them in the inn. Jesus was real. He was one of us. And I don't say that in a metaphorical sense either. He was genetically, scientifically one of us. Right? In fact, it's safe to say we share common ancestors with Jesus, at least on his mom's side. Genetic experts determined years ago by studying mitochondrial DNA that we all have a common female ancestor. Every single person alive comes from one single woman, right? The Bible calls her Eve. Scientists call her mitochondrial Eve. So once again, science and the Bible are basically on the same page with this idea. And if they're both right, which I believe they are, that makes us all cousins, including Jesus. We're connected. Sometimes we're more closely connected than we even know. I learned a few years ago by going to this ancestry site that I'm a sixth cousin to Elvis on my mom's side, right? Which means that I share great, 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 great grandparents with Elvis. With Elvis. Now, of course, with Jesus, it goes back a lot further than that, but the point is, we're all connected, and we always have been. Jesus wasn't a Superman character that, jetted in from some other planet. He was really one of us, and that's good news. As the writer of Hebrews put it, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who in every respect has been tested as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore approach the throne of grace with boldness, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. The fact God came among us in Jesus changed everything, for God and for us. That's not only why we can approach the throne of grace with boldness, but also so that we can know how to live. Not only did Jesus experience the fullness of what it means to be human, but He shows us the way through. In Jesus, we see how it's done, how it's supposed to be done. Life is difficult. God knows that. To believe in this living is a hard way to go, but Jesus shows us the way. That's why we're messengers of good news and not bad news. I have to admit, I'm always a little confused when I hear Christians complaining about how terrible the world is, while also doing very little about it. Our mission as disciples isn't to complain or to lament the evil of the world. We're not prophets of doom and despair. It's not our job. It's not our mission. We are followers of Jesus and messengers of what? Good news. We don't focus on the darkness. We don't pretend like it doesn't exist. We acknowledge it. What we do is we shine light and love in the midst of it. That's what we do. Another one of my favorite John Prine songs is called It's a Big Old Goofy World. If you have never heard it, I recommend it. I've always loved that title because it's such an accurate description. It is a big old goofy world. It's filled with indignities of all kinds. So the best thing we can do is focus on the good, trust in God's plan, and continue to live as people of love and light. In Jesus, God came among us in the flesh. Our best bet then is to stay focused on Him and follow wherever He leads.